Welcome to Explain It. Today, we are diving into an agreement that could literally change the price of the car you drive and the clothes you wear. It's the massive free trade deal between India and the European Union, and folks are calling it a game changer for a very, very good reason. We are talking about a pact that is set to reshape global trade as we know it. Right, let's start with this quote. That powerful statement is from the European Commission's president, Ursula von der Leyen. She called it the mother of all deals. And believe me, that's not just political hype. It's a signal of the incredible scale, the sheer ambition of what has just been accomplished.
And that number is exactly why. 2 billion people. This agreement creates a single free trade zone that connects the world's largest market, the EU, with the world's fastest-growing major economy, India. The economic shockwaves from this are going to be felt for decades to come.
So here's how we're going to break it all down in this explainer. We'll look at why this deal is getting so much attention, what's actually in it, the economic impact, the hard numbers, then we'll get into the geopolitical strategy behind it all, and finally, we'll talk about the challenges that still need to be ironed out.
Okay, first up, how did we even get here? Well, this was not some quick handshake deal put together overnight. The road to this agreement was a total marathon, not a sprint. And that really shows you just how challenging it is to bring two economic giants like these to the table.
Now, what's really fascinating about this timeline is the journey. I mean, look at this. Talks kicked off way back in 2007, but then they just hit a wall. For almost a decade, nothing happened, mainly because of disagreements on really tough issues like intellectual property. It wasn't until 2022 that things got a fresh start, leading to the final deal. A journey of almost 2 decades really shows you how many hurdles had to be cleared.
So, after all that time, what does this deal actually do? Well, at its very core, it's about one thing: tearing down the walls that make trade difficult, slow, and expensive. And the biggest, most obvious wall is something called a tariff.
So for anyone who needs a quick refresher, a tariff is pretty simple. It's just a tax on stuff you import from another country. You can think of it as a fee designed to make foreign products more expensive, which, in theory, gives a kind of home field advantage to your own local industries. This whole agreement is about taking a sledgehammer to those fees.
And this slide just lays out the transformation so perfectly. Before, you had this tangled mess of high tariffs and confusing rules. Now, we're moving to a trade superhighway, where tariffs on over 95% of goods are just gone. But the really crucial part here is the shift to a predictable, rules-based system. For any business, that's gold. It means you can invest for the long term, knowing the rules of the game won't just change on a whim.
Let's look at some real-world examples, because this is where it gets really interesting. Before this deal, if you wanted to import a car into India, you were looking at a mind-boggling 110% tariff. That's now being slashed to just 10% for a certain number of cars. On the other side, India's massive textile industry, those EU tariffs of up to 12% are dropping to 0. These are absolutely game-changing shifts for entire industries.
Okay, so we've talked about what's changing. Now for the fun part. Let's do the math. How do these cuts in tariffs actually translate into real money and real economic impact? Let's dive into the numbers to see just how big this really is.
For the European Union, the projections are pretty staggering. Research from the European Parliament suggests an annual economic gain of up to 8.5 billion euros, and that comes from all sorts of things. More efficient trade, lower prices for you and me, and a huge wave of new opportunities for European businesses.
The potential for growth here is just enormous. Projections show that EU exports to India, everything from machinery to luxury goods, could jump by as much as 56%. That is a massive unlocking of one of the world's most dynamic and fastest-growing consumer markets.
And make no mistake, this is absolutely a two-way street. For India, this is a monumental win. This deal means that an incredible 99.5% of all Indian goods heading to the EU will face 0 tariffs. That's basically everything. It's unprecedented access to one of the richest markets on the planet.
And to put a human face on that, let's look at India's crucial textiles and apparel sector. This is an industry that employs around 45 million people. This deal is projected to boost their exports to the EU by up to $10 billion every single year. That means more jobs, more security, and more opportunities for millions of families.
This chart really tells the story of the before, doesn't it? Before this deal, India's average tariffs were nearly 3 times higher than the EU's. So what this agreement does is create a much more level playing field, fixing a long-standing imbalance.
But here's the thing. What if this whole deal isn't just about euros and rupees? Its true significance might actually be the massive geopolitical shift it represents, especially in a world with growing trade tensions and changing alliances. This is about more than just money. You know the old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket? Well, that's exactly what's happening here on a global scale. Both the EU and India are looking to diversify. They want to reduce their dependence on any one single market, whether that's the US or China. This deal strengthens their own supply chains and sends a powerful message that they believe in a global system based on rules, not just raw power.
And this brings us to this really cool idea of a strategic third pole. Think of the world like a seesaw. If you only have 2 big players on either end, it can get really unstable really fast. But if you add a third strong player in the middle, they can act as a balancer. This deal helps position India as that crucial third power, creating a more stable, multipolar world that isn't just defined by the US-China rivalry.
Okay, now let's be real for a second. No deal of this size is ever perfect, and this one is no exception. While it solves a ton of problems, there is definitely some unfinished business to take care of, especially when we start talking about the environment.
So what's the elephant in the room? It all revolves around climate policy, and specifically, the EU's pretty controversial carbon tax. So what is it, and why could it throw a wrench in the works of this otherwise great agreement?
It's called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM for short. Basically, it's a tax the EU is putting on carbon-heavy imports like steel and aluminum. The big concern for India is that this new tax could hit some of its key export industries so hard that it could basically cancel out all the benefits they just got from the tariff cuts.
But, and this is a really important but, the deal doesn't just ignore this problem, it actually builds a bridge to find a solution. There's a solid commitment to cooperate, the real possibility of significant green funding, and a crucial promise that any flexibility the EU gives to other countries on this carbon tax, India will get that same flexibility too.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, this agreement is a monumental achievement. It is a commercially powerful deal that locks in huge tariff cuts. But just as importantly, it's a strategic anchor for both India and the EU, grounding them in a predictable, rules-based partnership, which is something the world desperately needs right now.
And all of this leaves us with one final huge question for the future. As these massive regional trade blocs, just like this one, get stronger and stronger, are we watching the end of globalization as we once knew it? Are we seeing the dawn of a new era? One that's defined not by a single global system, but by a handful of powerful competing superblocks? That is a future we will all be watching unfold.